Master Tavern Keeper's History of the Old World. And so, with the defeat, capture, and sacrifice of Vegir the Sacrificer, Marco and his men were once more rich men, right? Yeah, indeed, although the costs have been very high. Foremost amongst these was manpower. The crew of Marco's ship, La Pintolaga, was now under half strength. Additionally, they had barely enough gunpowder to shoot off a single cannon, and the mass and hull too had also been fractured and cracked in numerous places by the devastation caused by the comet. Oh, and the sails also had been torn to shreds. They were in a pretty sorry state, to be honest. Fortunately, they had plenty of timber and other useful materials with which to conduct repairs in the form of the beached longship of the fallen Chaos Champion. For one, the great north sail of this vessel was still intact, and this easily provided enough material for a new set of sails for the Tilean ship. Thus, with this aim in mind, Marco began to marshal his men. After the skink interpreter Huini Pachutli and his entourage had left with their prisoner and the stolen artifacts of Axolotl, Marco and my grandpapa began talking in earnest about repairing their ship as well as their fortunes. With a strategy in place, my grandpapa had the men count and sort the 2 large baskets of pearls that the lizard men had brought with them. He tasked the men with dividing the pearls up by size and quality. Although, truth be told, neither he nor Marco actually cared that much. But rather, they wanted the others occupied and out of the way whilst they inspected the wrecked longship. Marco was looking for something, and he did not want any of his men to find it before he did. Once he had searched the ship, he intended to let his men loose on the wreck for salvage. Oh, really? What, pray tell?
Yeah, but of course. Now, if you recall, in the aftermath of the explosion of water caused by the comet, the skink interpreter Huini Pachutli had enticed Marco to come to the wreck of Vegir's kingship by dropping an unusual green gem into the boat from his pterodon. Marco had been watching the skinks that had swarmed over the beached boat very closely and had noticed that none amongst them had retrieved the curious item. Marco wanted it. He and my grandpapa clambered onto the Norse boat. The sun was high in the sky now, and the midday heat was beginning to dry out the boat. My grandpapa said that as he stood upon the boat, he remembered thinking that it had only been a mere 6 hours earlier that they had all been woken by the bell from the watchtower, alerting them to the 3 passing Norse ships. How quickly things can change in such a short space of time.
Ah, indeed. Even the heaviest candle, possessed of the finest wick, can be snuffed out in but a moment by nothing more deadly than a passing breeze, if the wind so blows.
There are no constants in life, apart from the surety that change will come. And it is a wise man that embraces that. Fear of change is a disease that plagues the weak and keeps them in their place. Think on this, neophytes.
Yeah. Well said, Master Tavern Keeper. With that in mind, I had best get back to my tale whilst I still draw breath. There is certainly a wind outside, and I would not like my candle to be suddenly snuffed out. Touché. Sowieso, my grandpapa and Marco now began their search of the boat in earnest. If you recall, the Norse ship's mast had been split and cracked by one of the Tilean's cannonballs, but it still remained connected to the ship by the ropes that attached it to the sail and hull. The sail now covered the entire hull of the boat. The two men cut the ropes and peeled the sail away as they inspected the wreck. Beneath, the hull space was partially filled with seawater, within which were strewn the bloated, drowned bodies of Vegeer's bondsmen and huscarls, who had been trapped by the falling sailcloth, broken mast, and other debris. Each corpse swarmed with sandflies, biting midges, and other even nastier beach bugs. Also, many of the Norse sailors had open wounds, and within these, vicious, tiny, crab-like creatures fed on the carcasses. Marco turned to my grandpapa to speak. But before he did, he tied a handkerchief over his mouth and nose to create a makeshift mask.
I don't think the object Whiny Pachutli dropped is here. It couldn't have gotten through the sailcloth.
My grandpapa gave a fervent nod as he too tied a handkerchief over his mouth.
Let's leave this abattoir for our men to sort through, eh? I think we should investigate the stern of the boat.
The stern of the ship had been the seat of Vegeer's throne of skulls. This too had been shattered by a cannonball, and sharp bone shard had embedded itself into the woodwork and surrounding huscarls alike. The crater of bone left behind was sprayed in Vegeer's blood, where he had lost his leg to the projectile, and forming a halo around the point of impact, pieces of armor and the broken weapons of his guards were strewn hither and thither. My grandpapa and Marco pored over this area, searching for the green gem, but to no avail. Finally, hot, tired, and thirsty, the two pulled out a gourd of lizardman wine, and each took a long, large swig. As Marco did so, he leant back on the great Norse drum that had been thrown to the back of the boat, its skin ripped and torn. As he did so, the drum immediately collapsed in on itself, and for the second time that afternoon, Marco fell on his behind. As Marco sat there, wine dripping down his face, he felt something hard pressing against his buttocks. He quickly stood and saw the object of their search. The green gem of Lustria, and he grabbed it with both his hands.
You cannot outsmart me, Whiny Pachutli. I have your gem.
Marco held the gem up high to catch the afternoon sunlight. It was a curious thing that had been carefully carved into the shape of a serpent's tongue. It thrummed with power, and as Marco held it, he could feel his senses sharpening. At that very moment, a large sandfly dove towards Marco, intent on making a meal of his blood. Without even thinking, Marco drew his sword and, in an instant, cleaved the insect in two. For the second time that day, my grandpapa spat out a mouthful of lizardman vine that he had been drinking in surprise. Marco smiled and brought up the gem to more closely inspect it. It was smoothly finished, apart from the back. As he rubbed his fingers over it, he felt indentations cut into it. He again held it up to the sunlight and saw Bretonnian script carved into it.
Merci beaucoup, Marco Columbo.
In point of fact, Marco had not outsmarted the interpreter Whini Pachutli at all. In full knowing, the skink had left the gem as a gift, knowing that Marco alone would be able to retrieve it. Marco sighed and rubbed the back of his head.
Frederick, let's call the men together. It is a time to tear this shipwreck apart. We have a boat to fix.